This is Apostolic Foundations, written by Art Katz, narrated by Stephen Lambert, published by Real Truth Publications. The Lord designates himself as the apostle of our confession, and therefore I have a very special respect for anything that has to do with the word apostolic. Apostolic reality is at the heart of the faith, but it is not a word that is easy to define. It is an ultimate word pulsating with glory. It is a word that needs to be resuscitated rather than to be thought of merely as a denominational identification. Like every great biblical word, we need to be apprehended by the essence of what that word represents. Apostolic brings to mind the heart and spirit of the early church when it was at its glory, when it was authentic and vital. Indeed, only an apostolic church can stand and overcome in the perilous last days, and by that witness testify to an obdurate and resistant remnant of Israel in the mystery of God at the end of this age. If the church is built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, then we need to appropriate the meaning of that reality in order to come into the intention of God and convey that reality to the world. We need, therefore, to earnestly seek the apostolic foundations of the faith, or we will not have a church worthy of that name. A church with apostolic foundations is that body of people whose central impulse and principle of life and service is a total jealousy for the glory of God. Nothing of any eternal consequence can be accomplished in the earth independent of a church that has these foundations. The root of the Greek word apostolos is a sent one. That which is not sent of God cannot accomplish the purposes of God. He empowers only what He sends. And we are going to examine the anatomy of sending from the account of the commissioning and sending of Moses when he encountered God in the burning bush. All the timeless principles of God that have to do with apostolic foundations are found in that encounter. The word sent is used 5 times. And we are therefore given an insight into both the God who sends and the one who is sent. For example, why did this episode take place on the backside, west side of the desert? And why was there a 40-year preparation in the wilderness that preceded it? Why did God wait for Moses to turn aside and see before He called him? What if Moses had not turned aside to see? Could this turning aside be the pivotal and critical turning point? God did not tell Moses to turn aside to see. Something from the man himself was needful. And if God does not find that same thing in us, we will not come into an apostolic reality. There is a parallel between the commissioning of Paul and the commissioning of Moses. They were both great master builders who facilitated the purposes of God for their generation. 40 years earlier, and out of his own self-initiated conduct, Moses had sought to deliver his people from Egyptian bondage. It eventuated in the death of one Egyptian, hastily buried in the sand, and Moses was required to flee into the wilderness. When the moment of encounter came, the true fulfillment of his calling was given. To what degree, therefore, must failure precede a true appropriation of one's calling? It was certainly true for Paul and Moses. In all of our wishful intentions to serve God, are we willing for the humiliation of failure, allowed and established by God Himself? God forms a man whom He can send only out of the debris, the death, and the mortification of that failure. There is something about failure that does a necessary deep work in the human soul like nothing else can. The fact that we have not experienced failure is more than likely a statement that we have not had apostolic intention.
This has been Apostolic Foundations, written by Art Katz, narrated by Stephen Lambert, copyright 2024 by Real Truth Publications, production copyright 2024 by Real Truth Publications.